Good afternoon. My name is Austin Farrell, and we're going to be talking about the story today, The Gift of Constructivism, authored by none other than Austin Farrell himself. And so we start by Leonard, the Learning Theory Mouse, and he says, "Hello, class. It's me, Leonard, the Learning Theory Mouse. Today we're going to talk about constructivism, a learning theory that consists of transfer of learning and situational learning. We'll explain all these things through the story, and so it begins." He says, "There was an old schoolhouse where constructivism was taught in this school. In this schoolhouse, students engaged in critical thinking, in collaboration, and problem solving. All the students worked together and communicated to solve different problems that occur in the real world outside of the schoolhouse." And that's really what constructivism is all about, right? It's matching what you're learning conceptually with real life experiences to connect those learning processes together and make it very vivid to the learner. Suddenly, a girl named Annabelle noticed something strange about the schoolhouse. This is the only time we'll see Annabelle, but she notices something, and it's the schoolhouse. It was blasting off into space, but where was it going? Well, it was blasting off into a more meaningful context. In other words, it was going to a place where what they were learning, it would come to life through where they were. And the students could actually see how their learning applied to the real world. Since the students were learning about the winter, where would be better to go than the North Pole? And so here the students are. It says, since the kids were from none other than San Diego, they had no prior knowledge of what the snow was like. Instead of the teacher babbling on all day like usual, through explicit teaching where he just directly teaches and lectures, he let the kids run out. "Go and make some connections in your thinking," said the teacher. The teacher had taught them about the cold, but now the students were generalizing the information and living the experience. And that's what really generalizing is all about, right? Is making the knowledge general. Other words, it's not limited to a specific context conceptually. You could use it everywhere. You could use it in cold places like the North Pole. You could use it in cold places in Canada. All they're trying to do is apply their concepts that they've learned about cold in the classroom to other places too. And they're in the North Pole now. "But before you knew it, it's time for the next stop," said the teacher. Since the students had now acquired the experience of learning the cold more situationally, it was time to move to a different climate. Although they would move to another location, the teacher decided it might be best to continue being a facilitator of learning rather than teaching the entire time. So instead of just talking the entire time, sparking a conversation and then facilitating that conversation among the students. And so now it was time to do that, but in warmer climates. Wonder where they're going to go. Next stop, Blackbeard's Island, to learn about the more tropical climates. Blackbeard took the time to have a discussion with the kids about climates and thereby learn through a social process. So, what they're learning through is not simply a discussion where a teacher is just speaking the information, but now everybody's discussing tropical climate in this page. He started with an analogy. "Your emotions are like the weather, Blackbeard exclaimed. Sometimes you're hot like the island in the summer, and sometimes you're cold like the North Pole." Then Blackbeard gave the students a chance to try and swim, since all students were learning about how to swim in class. What better place to swim than here? They used the near transfer of learning to connect the motions they learned about in class to actually swimming in the warm ocean. So again, it's applying something conceptually, maybe the breaststroke or something, and learning the movements and seeing it visually, to connecting it kinesthetically and actually doing it. That's what they're doing on Blackbeard's Island. And then they had to go. After a long trip, it was finally time to get back to the schoolhouse. Even though they're in it, it's time to get back to where the original schoolhouse was situated. Situational learning. But before the kids left, the teacher asked one student for something they learned that day. And one of those students stood up quickly and said, "I learned that the weather is supposed to say kind of like our emotions. Whoopsies. Sometimes we're hot and mad, but sometimes we're cold and sad." The teacher smiled, noting that he had been successful because the student was an exemplar of the toughest concept that he wanted them to learn. This was far transfer of learning. So what he was doing by this was connecting two completely different concepts, but they do have something to do with each other in terms of maybe the extremism of a hot tropical climate to cold climates. It also has in the extremism, and it relates to being very mad or maybe very sad. They're kind of polar opposites, and so the students are making that connection from weather to emotions. What an incredible day. Then back to Leonard, he says, and that's how the teacher gave his students the gift of constructivism. He facilitated a group that collaborated and communicated to learn the concepts they had learned in class, but in the actual environments where the concepts happened. One could say it was a field trip of sorts, but either way, the students learned a lot that day. And that is the gift of constructivism.